Hi, I'm Emily. I'll be your storyteller today. Many of you use these stories to fall asleep. So before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Also, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Now get comfortable. Close your eyes and let the sound of the rain guide you into the story. From the moment I stepped through the door, I knew something was wrong. The air inside the apartment felt heavier than the outside, like the walls had been holding their breath for decades. There was a sharp, unpleasant scent. Old wood, cheap, paint, and something else. Something sour that clung to my throat. The last light of the afternoon filtered through torn curtains, casting long, distorted shadows on the worn wooden floor. My stomach twisted for no clear reason, but I blamed it on the exhaustion of the move. The realtor had been brief when handing me the keys, almost too eager to leave. He laughed nervously, mumbling something about old-world charm, before disappearing down the stairs. Alone, my footsteps echoed in the empty corridors, making the space seem larger, deeper, almost breathing on its own. Despite the fresh coat of paint, the walls seemed to absorb the little light, devouring it hungrily. A shiver ran down my spine, but I forced a smile. Just my imagination, I whispered to myself. The apartment was small. A living room, a cramped kitchen, a single bedroom, and a tiny bathroom. Yet something in the corners, in the spaces between the door frames and the cracked windowsills, seemed to pulse. If I stood very still, I could almost hear a low, humming vibration hidden beneath the silence. I unpacked the first boxes quickly, filling the space with familiar objects, trying to make it feel like home. But the apartment seemed resistant, almost rejecting the idea of being lived in again. My eyes were drawn to a thin crack running along the living room wall, stretching from the floor halfway up. It wasn't just a crack. It looked more like a wound, raw and whispering cold air, from somewhere unseen. I brushed my fingers along it and recoiled at the icy draft that seeped through. Suppressing a shiver, I forced myself to focus on unpacking, determined to settle before darkness fully fell. After all, I told myself, it was just an old building, nothing more. Time slipped away as I worked, and when I looked up, the natural light was gone. The flickering yellow bulbs did little to fight back the encroaching darkness pooling in every corner. From the kitchen, I could hear the faucet drip, each droplet tapping out a nervous rhythm. In the bathroom, an old mirror hung crooked, reflecting my face in a distorted, unsettling way. Every detail, every sound, seemed to weave a tapestry of unease that tightened around me. To break the silence, I switched on an old radio I had unpacked. The static buzzed violently before settling into a faint, ghostly melody. Even the music sounded muted, like it was struggling to reach me through thick layers of dust. I sat on my makeshift couch, breathing slowly, trying not to listen too closely to the whispering walls. The shadows moved with the faint light, dancing like quiet figures watching from the edges. I thought about calling someone, a friend, my mother, anyone. But when I checked my phone, I found no signal, not even a single bar. Frowning, I walked to the window, raising my phone to the sky, searching for connection. Outside, the street was deserted, swallowed by a creeping, heavy mist that blurred the world. The flickering streetlights fought a losing battle against the night pressing in. Giving up, I lay down on the floor mattress I had hastily arranged. Every creak of the wood, every shift in the wind against the cracked windows seemed unbearably loud. I squeezed my eyes shut, refusing to imagine faces forming in the dark corners. I told myself over and over it was just nerves, just the stress of moving into a new place. But just as sleep began to pull me under, I heard it 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the wall behind my head. I didn't sleep. Not really. I lay there for hours, eyes shut, body frozen, listening. The silence wasn't empty. It was thick, breathing, filled with invisible things. Every few minutes, the pipes groaned or something clicked far off in the kitchen. But the worst sound came just after 3 a.m. That same slow, deliberate knock. I sat up quickly, holding my breath, trying to convince myself it was a dream. But I was awake. Completely. Heart racing, skin cold, breath shallow. The knock had come from behind the wall where the bed sat. The bedroom. Wall that faced the hallway. There was no one there. There couldn't be. And yet I couldn't bring myself to check. I just stayed still. The knocking didn't return. But the silence after was even worse. Like something was waiting, watching to see what I'd do next. Eventually, I got up and paced the apartment with slow, quiet steps. The wooden floors creaked beneath me, sharp and sudden in the stillness. I reached the window and stared out into the fog. The outside world felt unreal. There were no cars, no footsteps, no street sounds, just mist curling around the lampposts. It felt like the entire city had disappeared, like I was the only one left alive. Or maybe I wasn't alone at all. Maybe something out there was staring back. But I couldn't see it, only feel its weight pressing through the glass. Back in the living room, I passed the mirror again. This time I looked, really looked. My reflection stared back. But there was a delay, like the image was lagging behind me. It blinked just a fraction too late, its head tilted slower than mine. I stepped back, my pulse hammering through my temples. I covered the mirror with a blanket. I couldn't look at it again. Then I unplugged the radio. Even though it wasn't on, I could swear I heard faint static. I left the kitchen light on and curled up on the couch, wrapping myself in a blanket. I told myself I'd call the landlord first thing in the morning, but part of me already knew. This wasn't something a phone call could fix. Just before dawn, I drifted into a shallow, haunted sleep. I dreamed of being underground, in tunnels lined with dripping bricks and whispers. I walked for hours, barefoot, my footsteps echoing into darkness. Something followed me, just out of sight, breathing wetly behind my neck. When I turned to look, I woke up. The sun was rising when I opened my eyes. Light crept through the blinds, pale and cold. The kitchen was exactly how I left it, but the bathroom door was slightly open now. I was sure I'd closed it the night before. And then I noticed the mirror was uncovered again. I stood there, staring at it from across the room, afraid to move closer. The blanket I had used was folded neatly on the floor beneath the frame. I hadn't done that. I hadn't even left the couch. As I stepped forward, my phone vibrated once on the table, a single short buzz. I picked it up and looked at the screen. 3:17 a.m., missed call. My heart dropped. There had been no ringing, no light. Just the timestamp and the notification. The number was blank, untraceable. I didn't know what terrified me more, the missed call, or the feeling that I already knew who, or what, had tried to reach me. I spent the morning pretending nothing had happened. I showered, made coffee, unpacked more boxes, all with a growing sense of denial. But the apartment felt different in daylight, no less haunted, just quieter. The kind of quiet that isn't peaceful, but expectant, like holding your breath right before something breaks. I tried the mirror again, expecting to see it uncovered, but the blanket stayed in place. No movement, no flicker, no delayed reflection. just dull fabric and a warped frame. It almost made me laugh, how absurd it all felt. I nearly convinced myself that stress was to blame, that none of it had been real. But that illusion didn't last long. Around noon, I heard it. A faint metallic rattle deep within the walls, like a distant chain being dragged. At first I thought it was the plumbing. Old buildings make noise, I reminded myself, but the sound was rhythmic and far too intentional. It didn't stop. It moved through the pipes, from room to room, as if following me. I turned off the water main in the kitchen just to be sure, but the sound kept going. Slow, steady scraping that made my teeth clench. Was coming from inside the walls, not through them. I pressed my ear against the drywall in the hallway. The pipe behind it pulsed with a deep thudding, like a heartbeat. And just beneath that, something else. A whisper, not in words, but in feeling. Cold, sharp, invasive. It told me I wasn't alone. I pulled back quickly, stumbling into the opposite wall, chest tight. The apartment held its silence again, as if mocking my fear. I turned, on every light, opened all the windows, and stood in the center of the room. Sunlight touched the floor, but not the corners. Those shadows, they didn't move right. In a moment of desperation, I left. I walked 2 blocks, breathing fresh air like I'd been underwater for hours. People moved around me, laughed, lived, untouched by what I carried home. I sat on a bench and watched the sky, afraid to return. But I knew I had to. Whatever it was tied to that place. When I came back, the apartment greeted me with silence again. I checked the walls, the mirror, the pipes. Everything seemed still. For the rest of the evening, there was nothing unusual. No knocks, no whispers, no movement, until the shower turned on by itself at 3:17 a.m. I stood in the hallway, watching steam creep beneath the bathroom door. The air smelled of rust and mold, thick and choking. I walked forward slowly, each step louder than the last. When I opened the door, the water was running, ice cold, and in the mirror, a handprint faded from the inside of the glass. I didn't sleep after that. I sat by the kitchen window, staring out into the night as the fog thickened. Something in the building had noticed me. And now, I think it was waiting to see what I'd do next. Not to scare me, but to bring me closer. It started with a feeling, subtle at first. The hallway near my bedroom didn't feel solid anymore. When I walked through it, the floor seemed to dip ever so slightly, like it gave beneath my weight. I paused each time, thinking maybe the boards were just old or warped. But the sensation wasn't in the floor. It was in the air. The hallway felt alive. Not figuratively. Truly alive. When I passed through it, the temperature dropped, the pressure shifted, like stepping into a mouth exhaling slowly. I'd feel it on my skin, that cool, humid breath brushing my arms and neck. Once, I held my hand out, and I swear, something invisible moved through my fingers. I started avoiding that part of the apartment altogether. I detoured through the kitchen just to grab something from the bedroom. But eventually, I had to pass through. And each time, the sensation grew stronger. It was like the hallway had lungs, and I had entered its rhythm. Inhale as I stepped in, exhale as I walked through. The light bulb in the hallway began to flicker each time I entered. Not random flickering. Always. 2 slow pulses, like a signal. I changed the bulb twice, checked the wiring, but the pattern remained. One night I stood beneath it for 10 minutes, It stayed dark, until I turned my back. Then it blinked once. I started hearing soft creaks above me while in the hallway, not from the floor above, from the ceiling right over my head. It paced with me, stopped when I stopped. I tried banging on the ceiling once. The sound that came back wasn't an echo. It was a knock, as if someone replied. The walls themselves felt tighter, not physically but in sensation, like something was leaning in from both sides. I couldn't breathe deeply in there. The air was thick, warm, and laced with the scent of mildew. Sometimes I heard my name whispered so softly I questioned my sanity, but it always came from that hallway, never anywhere else. Late one night, I walked through it with the lights off, just to prove it was all in my head. Halfway across, I stopped. I didn't hear a sound. I felt it. Something breathing right next to me. I stood frozen, too scared to speak, too proud to run. I whispered hello to the dark, like an idiot. The breath on my skin grew colder, sharp, cutting cold. I could almost feel a face inches from mine. Then suddenly, warmth again, and it was gone. After that, I began dreaming of lungs. Massive, rotting lungs pulsing behind the hallway walls, stitched to the pipes. I'd walk through in my dream and hear them wheeze, gurgle, choke, and always, just before I woke up, they'd stop breathing completely, leaving me gasping for air in the middle of the night. I started sleeping on the couch again, refusing to cross the hallway at night. It wasn't just a corridor anymore. It was a boundary, a threshold, and I couldn't help but feel like something on the other side was waiting, not to come through, but for me to make the mistake of crossing in the dark. I had covered the bathroom mirror again, tightly this time. 2 layers of fabric, taped at the corners. No way for it to fall on its own. But that morning, the covering was bunched at the floor again. Not torn, not wrinkled, just carefully folded, as if someone had taken their time removing it. I stared at the exposed mirror for a long time. It was ordinary, cracked at one corner, a little foggy around the edges. But there was something in it that didn't belong. Not a shape, a delay. It moved with me, but not quite as me. The reflections were always just a beat behind. If I turned my head, the image followed. Half a second later. If I blinked, the mirror version would blink twice. I told myself it was just my nerves, but I knew better. Mirrors don't hesitate. One night, I tested it. I stood still and stared directly into it for 5 minutes. Then, slowly, I lifted my hand, and the reflection didn't move. My real hand was raised. The one in the mirror stayed at its side, perfectly still. I nearly screamed, but instead, I backed away, keeping my eyes locked on the glass. Only when I reached the doorway did the reflection smile. It was brief. Faint, a twitch of the lips, but I saw it, and it saw me see it. After that, I covered the mirror again, not with cloth this time, with cardboard, duct tape, and a towel. And still, every 2 or 3 days, I'd find it uncovered, always folded, always silent, like it was inviting me back for another look. I avoided the bathroom mirror after that, but mirrors are everywhere. In windows, in appliances, in screens. And sometimes, in the corner of my eye, I'd catch something. Not a face, but a feeling of one. Watching me through the silver, just out of reach. I stopped brushing my teeth in there. Stopped showering even. I started using the kitchen sink. I knew it was irrational, but I couldn't help it. That glass. It remembered me, and I was terrified of what it might show me next. Then came the dream, I was inside the mirror, not in front of it. I saw my own. Back as I stood in the bathroom, motionless, I screamed, pounded the glass, but I had no sound, and my body smiled, and turned off the light. That's when I woke up, soaked in sweat, and the bathroom light, which I never used, was glowing softly through the crack in the door, waiting for me. I thought about smashing the mirror, just picking up a hammer and ending it, but something stopped me. Something like instinct, like I'd be doing exactly what it wanted me to do. And so I left it there, covered again, but never truly unseen. There was a door in the apartment I hadn't paid much attention to. It was smaller than the others, narrow and almost hidden beside the pantry. I assumed it was a utility closet, or just sealed shut from old renovations. But one evening, while cleaning, near the kitchen, I tried the handle. It didn't budge, locked tight, with no visible keyhole. That shouldn't have bothered me. Old apartments always have sealed spaces, dead storage, forgotten nooks. But something about this door felt wrong, like it had been locked not for protection, but containment. The air near it was always colder, stiller, heavier. I leaned my ear against it and listened. At first, there was nothing. Silence. Then, faint and far away, a sound like slow breathing, not human, not steady. It rasped and gurgled like a wind trapped in a throat. I pulled away, heart racing, convincing myself it was the pipes. But the sound didn't match the rhythm of plumbing. It was alive, organic, like something sleeping behind the door. I searched the apartment for a key, though I wasn't sure why. I told myself it was curiosity, but it felt more like compulsion. 2 days later, I found an old key tucked beneath a loose floorboard. It was rusted, heavy, and didn't match any of the visible locks in the apartment. But when I approached the narrow door with it, something shifted, not physically. The air around it seemed to tighten, resist, as if the door didn't want to be opened. I held the key close to the knob but didn't insert it. Something inside me screamed to stop, to wait. I stood there frozen, my hand hovering for what felt like minutes. Finally, I backed away, locking the key in a drawer and slamming it shut. But the door had already changed. Now, every night, I hear something behind it. Soft scraping, like nails dragging along the other side. Sometimes slow, sometimes urgent. Once, I heard my name, whispered so softly it made my skin crawl. It wasn't a voice I recognized, but it knew me. I started placing a chair in front of it before bed. Not that it would stop anything, but it made me feel less helpless. Still, every morning, the chair would be pushed aside slightly, only by a few inches, but enough to be deliberate. Enough to say, "You can try to keep me in." The hallway light outside the door began flickering every night at 3:17, always the same time, always just as I was falling asleep. The rhythm matched the sound behind the door. Knock. Pause. Scrape. It felt like the room was breathing again, only harder. I don't know what's behind that door, but it wants me to open it. I feel it more each day, in the floor, the air, my dreams. And I know that sooner or later, I will. Not because I want to, but because the apartment won't let me resist forever. It started as a faint odor, something you could almost ignore. A sour, earthy scent, like damp wood left too long in the dark. At first, I thought it was mold coming from the walls or pipes. Old buildings carry old smells, after all. But this one moved. Some days it came from the kitchen, other times from the hallway, or even the ceiling above my bed. It would disappear for hours, sometimes days. then returned stronger, more focused, like it was hunting. And each time, it settled closer to me. No amount of cleaning helped. I scrubbed floors, poured bleach down, drains aired the rooms. Still, the scent always returned, but worse than its presence was how it made me feel, like I was rotting from the inside out. I stopped inviting people over. Not that I had many to begin with, but now I was ashamed, not just of the smell, but of what it implied. Decay, infection, something broken that couldn't be fixed, something spreading. One night I followed it. The scent was strongest near the locked door. I knelt beside it, pressing my face to the floor. The smell poured through the gap beneath the wood like heat from a furnace. But instead of warmth, it carried cold. I pulled back, gagging. Not just from the intensity, but from the memory it triggered. It smelled like the freezer at my childhood home after a power outage, the thick, clinging rot of forgotten meat. Only this was older, deeper, patient. I had a nightmare that night. In it, I was digging through the walls with my bare hands, peeling away drywall, insulation, bone, and beneath it all was a mouth, buried and breathing. And the breath was the smell, wet and ancient. When I woke, the apartment reeked, worse than before, overwhelming. I ran to the window, gasping for fresh air, but even outside it clung to my clothes, my skin, my lungs, like I had become the source. Since then, the smell has never fully left. Some days, it's faint, like a warning. Other times, it seeps into everything I own. I've washed the same shirt 5 times. It still smells like death. I considered calling someone. A plumber, the landlord, even a priest. But I didn't know what to say. My apartment smells like something that isn't supposed to be alive. There are no service requests for that. No remedies for ancient rot. Only silence. And the smell. Always the smell. That morning, I found something new under the bed. A small, wet stain on the wood floor. Brownish red, sticky, smelling like rust and meat. I hadn't spilled anything. I hadn't touched the floor. But the floor had touched me. The first knock had been soft, subtle enough to be dismissed. But the second was deliberate. It came at exactly 3:17 a.m., like a clock striking midnight in a nightmare. 3 loud knocks against the wall behind my headboard, each one spaced with heavy silence in between. I sat up immediately, my body frozen, my breath shallow. The air felt denser than usual, as if the sound had thickened it. I waited, listening, hoping it was over. But something about that rhythm, it wasn't random. It felt like a signal, a summons. This time I didn't just stay in bed. I got up, slowly, reluctantly, and walked to the wall. I placed my hand flat against the cold plaster, pressing my ear close. There was no sound on the other side, just stillness, and a faint vibration beneath my palm. It felt like a heartbeat, slow, deep, pulsing through the wall into my skin. I pulled my hand back, and for a moment, the wall felt warm, almost feverish, as if it were alive. I went to the kitchen and sat in the dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't want to disturb whatever was listening. Instead, I stared out the window at the mist-covered street. There were no cars, no people, just the glow of the flickering streetlight. And behind me, always behind me, the hallway waited. By 4 a.m., I finally laid back down. But sleep didn't come. Every creak of the wood, every shift in air made me flinch. I felt eyes on me that weren't mine, felt breath that wasn't mine, felt time moving around me, not forward, but inward. That morning I found something new on the bedroom wall, a small crack, exactly where I'd pressed my hand. Thin, fresh, and red, like a cut. It hadn't been there the day before, and it hadn't come from the outside. I touched it, gently. The surface was rough, as if the wall had been torn from the inside. There was no dust, no debris, no plaster. Only that thin red line, pulsing faintly in the early light, and the feeling that something had touched back. I covered the wall with a dresser, not to protect myself, but to make it forget me. But deep down, I knew it wouldn't work. You don't answer a knock and then pretend you didn't hear it. Something knocked, and now it was waiting for me to knock back. That night, I dreamed I was inside the wall, crushed between wood and stone, unable to move, barely able to breathe. And on the other side, something pressed its ear against the plaster. It whispered my name over and over until my chest cracked, and then I woke up gasping, clutching at nothing but air. When I checked the wall the next morning, the crack was gone. No red line, no evidence. Just smooth paint and silence. But my hand still smelled faintly of rust and soil, and the knocking hadn't stopped. I had just stopped hearing it. The ceiling above my bedroom had started to creak, not from wind or temperature shifts, but in patterns. Pacing. 4 slow steps, a pause, then 4 more. I lived on the top floor. There was nothing above me. At least, there wasn't supposed to be. I told myself it was old pipes, maybe rodents. I even called maintenance, who checked the roof access. They said it was sealed, padlocked. No one had been up there in years. Still, every night, the footsteps returned. They came precisely at 3:17 a.m., not earlier, not later. Always the same rhythm, the same pacing. Like a rehearsal. Like someone walking to remember the shape of the floor, as if the ceiling was being memorized from the other side. I began sleeping in the living room again. But even from there, I could hear it. Faint, muffled, but persistent. I tried music, white noise, even earplugs. Nothing helped. The footsteps were always louder than whatever I used to drown them. One morning, I climbed the emergency stairwell to the roof. The door was rusted shut, chained from the inside. I banged, shouted, waited. Nothing. But as I turned to leave, I noticed something carved into the wall beside the door. A small set of initials, followed by the number 317. That night, I left my phone recording beside the bed. In the morning, I listened to the audio with trembling hands. At exactly 3:17, the recording captured it clearly. 6 steps across the ceiling. A long pause, then a soft thump. Like someone sitting down directly above me. I climbed onto a chair and pressed my ear to the ceiling. I don't know what I expected. Voices, perhaps. Breathing. Instead, I heard humming. Faint. Tuneless. Childlike. The humming grew louder over the following nights. Not in volume, but in presence. It filled the room, leaking into dreams. Sometimes I'd wake up humming the same melody, and I'd never remember learning it. One night, I whispered, "Who are you?" There was no reply, just silence, thick and deliberate. But in the morning, a single word was written on my bathroom mirror. Neighbor, written backward, as if from the other side. Later that week, I stood in the hallway just below the ceiling. I clapped once, loudly, just to test the space. A second later, I heard it. a single delayed clap from above. It wasn't loud, but it was timed, like an echo with intention. After that, I started noticing things out of place. Dust patterns shifted, hairline cracks on the ceiling that weren't there before. And once, a faint scrape of fingernails across plaster while I was half asleep. It wasn't imagined, it was deliberate. The ceiling wasn't just a ceiling anymore. It was a floor, for someone else. One afternoon, I came home and found footprints in the dust above the light fixture. Barefoot. Human-sized, pressed into the ceiling like someone had been standing upside down, staring straight down at me, waiting for me to notice. Now, when I lie in bed, I don't just hear footsteps. I feel pressure, subtle shifts, as if weight is being tested, as if the ceiling is thinning, as if it's learning how to give way. I always hated the space beneath the bed, even as a child. It was the perfect hiding place for things that shouldn't be real. But lately, it had begun to feel like something down there was listening. Not moving, not touching, just listening, waiting, for me to forget it was there. At first, it was subtle, a soft hum when the room was silent, a chill that clung to the floor, even on warmer nights. Sometimes I thought I saw movement in the gap between the frame and the floor, but I told myself it was imagination, exhaustion, shadows. Then one night, while lying half asleep, I heard it, a whisper, thin and breathless, drifting up through the mattress. It wasn't words at first, just syllables, shapes of thought, like someone trying to speak with no mouth. It wrapped around my spine like ice. I froze, afraid to move, afraid to breathe too loudly. The whisper continued, rising just enough to be heard. My name. It knew my name, and it said it like a memory, like regret. I jumped out of bed, flipped the light on, and dropped to the floor. Nothing was under there. No object, no person, no sound. But the floor was warm, as if something had been lying there moments before. And in the dust, there was a streak, like something had crawled away, back into the shadows. I tried to sleep on the couch again, but even there, I could hear the floorboards shifting beneath me. I imagined hands stretching up through the wood, fingers curling around the frame, clawing softly at the mattress from underneath. After 3 nights of this, I placed a camera under the bed. It recorded nothing at first, just darkness, stillness, static. But on the 4th night, I played back the footage. At 3:17 a.m., the audio spiked. A voice whispered clearly, "Please, let me out." The voice didn't sound angry. It sounded tired, broken, like someone who had been waiting a very long time, like someone who had once lived and been forgotten. I left the camera running every night after that. Sometimes it captured breathing. Other times, tapping, scratching, or laughter that wasn't mine. I stopped watching the recordings, but I couldn't bring myself to delete them. Now I sleep with the lights on, the bed pushed to the center of the room, but I still hear the whisper beneath me. It says less now, but it's louder, as if it's getting closer, as if it no longer needs the dark to reach me. It began with a chill in the hallway, light, harmless, forgettable. But soon it spread. The temperature would drop in strange, concentrated pockets. Not the whole apartment, just parts, corners, chairs, doorways I hadn't passed through yet. At first, I blamed the insulation, old windows, faulty seals, maybe a vent I couldn't find. But the air wasn't just cold, and it felt thick, like it had weight, like it had presence. One afternoon, I passed through the kitchen and felt it. A sudden wave of freezing air, centered entirely over the sink. When I reached out, the metal was covered in condensation, but only on the left side. The right side was perfectly dry. Some nights I'd wake to find my breath fogging in front of me. Even though the heating was on, even though the room was sealed, the cold would settle around me like a blanket. Not on my skin, beneath it, like something inside me was responding to it. I started marking the cold spots with sticky notes, little yellow squares scattered across the apartment. Some disappeared overnight. Others would reappear in new places where I hadn't placed them, as if the cold itself was moving, shifting its territory. Once, I placed a note on the bathroom mirror. When I returned, the mirror was clear, not fogged, but the note had frozen. Edges curled, paper stiff with frost. I ran my fingers across it, and it cracked like glass. There was no frost anywhere else in the room. Sometimes, I'd walk through a cold spot and feel resistance, like pushing through a thin membrane or a curtain of water. My skin would prickle, my chest would tighten, and afterward the smell of rot would follow me for hours, even when I changed clothes. One morning, I found ice crystals on the inside of the bedroom window, but only over the shape of a hand. 5 fingers, palm open, pressed against the glass from the inside. I didn't touch it. I just stared until it melted on its own. I stopped using blankets. The cold came from within now, from somewhere deeper. No matter what I wore, no matter how high I turned the heat. There were moments I could see my breath while my skin burned. Contradiction I no longer questioned. Now, the cold comes before anything else. Before the whispers, before the knocks, before the shadows move. It's no longer a warning. It's a greeting. Something is saying, I'm here. The old radio hadn't worked in weeks. I had unplugged it after the static became unbearable. Constant, grating, directionless. But one night, I woke to the sound of it humming. Not playing music. Humming. Like a voice without language. I checked. The plug. Still out. The power light was dark. But the sound came from its speaker. Soft and rhythmic. A low vibration that seemed to sync with my own heartbeat. I stood frozen, unable to turn it off. Then came the whisper. Not from the room. Not from the hallway. From the radio itself. It said my name. Clear. Slow. Tender. Almost. I backed away, heart racing, ears ringing. The voice continued, growing louder without raising its tone. It spoke in fragments, pieces of things I'd never told anyone, memories, thoughts, regrets, secrets I hadn't admitted even to myself. I knocked the radio over in panic. The voice stopped mid-word. The hum returned, low and pulsing, like breath in a tunnel. Then silence, absolute and sudden. The kind of silence that hurts. I didn't sleep that night. I placed the radio outside my apartment door, left it in the hallway, facing the stairwell. But the next morning, it was back inside, sitting on the kitchen table, clean and dry. I started hearing faint music through the walls. Not melodies, just piano keys, pressed one at a time. Sometimes a single note would repeat for hours, always distant, like it was echoing from another room. But I knew the building was empty above and below. Eventually, I stopped touching the radio. It would speak on its own when it wanted to, never directly, never clearly. Just murmurs, laughter, static, and my name over and over, always at 3:17 a.m. One night, I asked it a question, "What do you want?" For a moment, there was nothing. Just air. Then, remember, the voice was mine. but I never said that word. I covered the radio with a towel and locked it in a drawer. But sometimes I still hear it, whispering through the wood, calling from a distance that isn't measured in space, calling from inside, from wherever memory goes to rot. Last night, it spoke again. Only one sentence. Don't trust the hallway. The voice was clearer this time. Urgent. I haven't walked past the hallway light switch since. I'm afraid the hallway might answer. I've started writing down everything it says. But the pages don't stay the same. Every morning, some words disappear, replaced by others I never wrote. They feel older, like I'm not writing them, just copying what I've already forgotten. The sound started small, just a shuffle in the dark, soft enough to dismiss as the apartment settling. But I knew the rhythm. I'd heard it before, above me, in the ceiling. Only now it was inside the apartment. The footsteps came every night, always at 3:17 a.m. Never earlier. Never later. They would start in the kitchen, soft and hesitant, then drift across the floor like someone walking barefoot. Slow, deliberate, knowing I was awake. I lay still, pretending to sleep, heart pounding. If I moved, the steps paused. If I held my breath, they crept closer. Each time they would stop right beside the couch, sometimes for seconds, sometimes for minutes. Once, I felt the cushion beside me shift. Just slightly, as if someone sat down. No sound, no pressure, just that faint movement. I didn't open my eyes. I couldn't bear to see what might be waiting. The next morning, I checked the floor. No footprints, but a single wet spot near the couch, the shape of a heel. It hadn't rained, and I never walk barefoot inside. I set up motion sensors across the room, tiny ones that beep when triggered. That night, the footsteps returned. The sensors never went off, but the steps walked right past each one. I started counting them. 10 steps from the kitchen to the living room, 7 more to the foot of the couch. Then silence. Always silence. And the weight of eyes I couldn't see. I recorded the sounds, desperate to prove they were real. The audio picked up the steps, clear as day. But when I played it back the next morning, something had changed. The steps were still there, but mine were missing. It was as if I had never been in the room at all. Now I hear the footsteps even when I'm not home, on voicemails. In background noise on calls, they follow me everywhere, tapping quietly through headphones. I change rooms, apartments, cities. The sound always finds me. I no longer know if the steps are coming toward me or if I'm walking toward them. There's a rhythm to it now, like a dance I didn't agree to learn. Some nights, I feel my legs move on their own, pacing, mimicking the pattern I've heard for weeks, becoming part of it. And last night, I didn't hear the footsteps at all, only my own, circling the couch, over and over until the floorboards stopped creaking beneath me. That's when I realized I was the one walking, and something else was lying still, in my place, breathing softly, waiting for me to stop. It fell in the middle of the night. No wind, no movement, just a sudden crash from the hallway wall. I rushed out, heart pounding, expecting damage, but the frame wasn't shattered, just cracked across the glass, and the photo inside was gone. It had been a picture of me and my sister, taken years ago, before things got complicated. I hadn't thought of it much, but I'd kept it up as a quiet reminder. Now the frame was empty, and the photo nowhere to be found. I searched the floor, the nearby shelves, the corners. Nothing. Not even a torn piece. It hadn't fallen out. It had been removed, deliberately. The next day, I found a photo tucked beneath my pillow. Same frame, different image. It was me, sleeping on the couch, mouth slightly open. The photo had been taken from above, and I had no memory of it ever being captured. I burned the picture in the sink, watching it curl and blacken. The scent was stronger than I expected, acrid and wet. Not like photo paper, like something that had once been alive. The smoke clung to my clothes for hours. That night, more frames shifted on the walls, crooked, tilted, some facing backward as if ashamed, others cracked in. The same diagonal line, all the photos, replaced. Each new image showed me in a different room, sometimes standing, sometimes watching myself sleep. Once, I was in the hallway, hand pressed to the locked door, eyes open, staring at something just out of frame. I stopped looking at the walls, started removing every frame one by one, but each time I turned around, another would appear. Same frame, same slow spreading crack. The apartment was remembering me in its own way. Eventually, I covered the walls with sheets, blankets, towels, anything I could find, but they didn't stay up. Each morning, the covers were folded neatly on the floor, and the photos were back, clearer, closer. Now, I see myself in them doing things I don't remember, opening drawers I never touched, walking into rooms I thought were locked, smiling at something just beyond the edge of the picture, as if someone else is using my face. This morning, I woke to find a picture frame at the foot of my bed. No photo. Just a black rectangle where the image should be. But when I tilted it under the light, I saw a faint outline of me holding the frame, inside the frame, inside the frame. I think the apartment is documenting me, not haunting, archiving, recording. Every step, every blink, every breath, preparing a record of what I was, before I become something else entirely. It started with the hallway light, a gentle flicker, soft, irregular, almost apologetic. At first, I thought it was a loose bulb, but no matter how many times I changed it, the flickering stayed, and always at the same time, 3:17 a.m. Eventually, the flickering spread. The kitchen light buzzed every time I opened the fridge. The bathroom light dimmed whenever I entered. Sometimes the living room lamp would flash, in a rhythm. Not random, like code, like breathing. I began to notice a patterned short flash, long pause. Short flash again. It repeated, steady and slow, whenever I stood still. The lights weren't failing. They were communicating. I recorded the pattern, hoping it was just faulty wiring. But when I showed it to a friend, he froze. Said it looked like Morse code. He translated it with shaking hands. It spelled one word, stay. I laughed nervously, pretending it didn't matter. But that night, every light in the apartment flickered in sync. Even the microwave display blinked along with the others. It was no longer subtle. It wanted to be seen. I stopped turning on the lights after that. Started using candles, soft, silent, honest. But even their flames began to tremble without wind, and shadows would stretch longer than the walls allowed, moving when I didn't. Once, the lights turned off by themselves. Total blackout. And, in that darkness, I heard something shift across the floor. Not footsteps. Something dragging. And then, a light flickered on by the door, alone. That bulb wasn't connected to any switch. It was part of a fixture I'd never installed, just hanging there, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The glow was sickly and pale, but in its light, I saw movement, down the hall. I threw the circuit breaker one night out of frustration, flipped every switch, cut all power. Yet the lights kept flickering, even brighter, and the walls seemed to pulse with them. The next morning, I found light bulbs scattered on the floor, perfectly lined up from the hallway to my bedroom, each one cold, each one intact, and all of them humming faintly. Now, when the lights flicker, I stop everything. I stand still, close my eyes, and listen. Sometimes it says nothing. Other times, I hear my name, not spoken, not whispered, just pulsing in the light itself. The dreams started quietly, not nightmares, just heavy, like I was sinking slowly through air made of water. There was no fear at first, just a sense of being pulled downward, deeper, past memory, past thought, into a place that felt too familiar. I'd wake up choking, gasping for air, but my mouth was dry, my skin cold. The room would be silent, but wet footprints would stain the floor, leading away from the couch, toward the hallway. In one dream, I stood waist-deep in black water inside the apartment. The furniture floated past like forgotten debris. The walls were sweating, not leaking, sweating, and something just beneath the surface kept brushing my legs. I never saw it. I didn't want to. Each time I tried to move, the water thickened. It wasn't like liquid, more like memory. Heavy, clinging to me, slowing every thought. And from beneath it, I'd hear my name. Not called, remembered. Eventually the dreams took over all sleep. No matter when or how I rested, the drowning followed. Sometimes I was in the bathtub. Sometimes the sink filled on its own. Once, I woke up with my hands submerged in a bucket I never placed. One night, I dreamed I was beneath the apartment itself, a flooded basement that didn't exist. Pipes dangled like vines, and the walls pulsed with breath. I walked for hours through water that never reached my knees, but always tried to pull me under. I stopped sleeping altogether for a while, stayed awake for 3 days straight. But on the third night, I blinked, just once, and woke up wet, completely soaked. Hair, clothes, mattress, everything. I checked every pipe, every faucet. No leaks, no condensation, and the smell wasn't water. It was old, stagnant, like something had died in it. After that, I stopped locking the bathroom door. If it wanted to come through, I didn't want to be caught in a small space. I stopped bathing too. The sound of water running made my chest tighten. Even rain outside triggered panic now. One dream lasted longer than the others. I was underwater, but breathing. Not with lungs, with memory. I felt thoughts drown one by one, until all that was left was the apartment. The most recent dream was different. I wasn't drowning anymore. I was watching. Someone else was sinking in my place, and I stood at the edge, holding their hand, smiling as they disappeared into the dark. Now every time I blink, I feel a drop run down my cheek. Not sweat, not tears, not rain, but water from somewhere far below. He was there for less than a second, but I saw him, standing outside my window. Still, tall, staring directly at me. It was 3:17 a.m. Of course it was. I'd just woken up from another drowning dream, heart racing, skin cold and damp. I sat up slowly, unsure if I'd imagined it. Fog pressed against the glass, thick and unnatural. But there, in the condensation, 5 fingerprints. Long, narrow, pressed from the outside. I live on the 6th floor. No balconies, no fire escape, nothing but empty air between my window and the ground. But those prints didn't care about gravity. The next morning, the prints were gone. But the image burned in my head remained. A man with no face, not missing. Just blurred, like a photograph in motion, or a memory you're not supposed to hold on to. The following night, I sat by the window and waited. I left the blinds open, even though it terrified me. I wanted proof. Needed confirmation that I hadn't lost my mind. But nothing came, until I blinked. And suddenly, he was there again. Closer this time, his head tilted slightly, not threatening, just observing, like I was the one on display. I didn't scream, didn't move. We just stared at each other. Him through fog, me through fear. Then slowly he raised one hand, pressed it gently to the glass, and smiled. Not with his mouth. He didn't have one. He smiled with stillness. The lights in the apartment flickered once, and when they returned, he was gone. Not vanished. Just absorbed into the mist. The kind of absence that feels louder than presence. He'd left something behind. On the floor beneath the window, I found a footprint. Bare, wet, slightly smudged, facing inward, like he had stepped through the glass and into me. Now I keep the windows closed and covered, but I still feel him watching, not from outside anymore, from somewhere closer, somewhere just behind my eyes. I don't know when the door appeared. One day it simply was, at the end of the hallway, past the bathroom, right where there had always been a blank wall. Now there was a door, shut tight, painted black. I stared at it for a long time, tried to recall if I'd ever seen it before. I hadn't, I was certain, but it looked old, as if it had always been there. The doorknob was brass, cold, slightly rusted. When I touched it, a static jolt shot up my arm. Not painful, just wrong, like touching something alive by mistake. I pulled my hand away. I didn't open it that day. Instead, I tried to ignore it, pretend it wasn't there. But every time I passed the hallway, it felt closer, like the door had shifted, leaned inward. On the third night, I dreamed of the room behind it. It was empty. Stone walls, a single chair in the center, and something breathing in the corner. I woke up with my feet dusty, as if I'd been walking barefoot on concrete. My socks were beside the couch, soaked and folded. I hadn't taken them off, and the soles of my feet were gray. That morning, the door was slightly open, just a crack, darkness beyond it, deeper than any shadow should be. It didn't smell musty. It smelled still. I pushed it open slowly. Inside was a room I didn't recognize. Not part of the blueprint. Not part of this reality. The walls pulsed faintly like lungs. The chair from my dream was there, facing the door, empty, waiting, and beside it a small, rotting book. I didn't step inside. I couldn't. But I stood at the threshold for what felt like hours. And the longer I stood there, the more the apartment behind me faded. When I finally shut the door, the hallway was colder, the lights dimmer, the air thicker. I had closed the door, but I knew the room was still watching, waiting for me to come back. Now, sometimes, the door disappears again. Other times, it's wide open, but never when I try to show someone. Only when I'm alone, and only when I'm weakest. It started with a crack, a new one, snaking across the wall near the old radiator. I pressed my fingers against it, and felt a hollow space behind. The plaster crumbled too easily, Something had been hidden there. Behind the wall, wrapped in rotting cloth, was a small leather journal, faded brown, stitched by hand. Its edges were brittle, water-damaged, but it pulsed with heat, like it had been waiting, like it had never truly cooled. I opened it gently, afraid it might fall apart. The first page was blank, smeared with something dark. The second held just one sentence, written in shaky ink. "If you found this, it's already too late." I kept reading. The entries were dated decades ago. No names, just timestamps and fear. They spoke of noises in the walls, moving rooms, shadows in mirrors. Each page grew more frantic, the handwriting worse. Some lines were crossed out violently, like the writer regretted revealing too much. One passage mentioned a black door, in the same spot where mine had appeared. They described a room that breathed, a chair that moved on its own, and something in the corner that never blinked. The writer said they tried to leave, packed bags, fled the building, but every time they escaped, they woke up in bed again. Same night, same hour, as if time itself had been stitched shut. They spoke of being followed, not outside, within. Thoughts that weren't theirs, memories of things they'd never done, a slow unraveling of identity. The final entries were almost unreadable, scratched into the paper with something sharp. One page simply repeated a phrase. "It wants a witness. It wants a mirror. It wants me," over and over again. Near the end, there was a crude map of the apartment, but with extra rooms, twisting, overlapping, doors where none should be. The last page was torn in half. The ink had soaked through like blood. Only a single word remained at the top. Neighbor. The same word I saw in the mirror days ago. I closed the journal and placed it back in the wall. I couldn't keep it near me, but I couldn't throw it away, because part of me felt it wasn't meant for anyone else, just for me, and whoever comes next. Sometimes at night I hear pages turning in the walls, soft, slow, thoughtful, like someone is still writing, continuing the story where I left off, and they know I'm reading. I found it in the kitchen cabinet behind a false panel. An old cassette tape, unlabeled, dusty but intact. Next to it, a tiny player, already loaded with batteries, as if it had been waiting for someone to press play. So I did. The tape clicked and hissed before the voice began. It was a man, trembling, exhausted, barely above a whisper. He didn't say his name, only that he had lived in this apartment before me, and that it had never let him leave. "I thought I was imagining things," he said, "the sounds, the dreams, the shifting walls. But it wasn't my mind. It was the apartment. It watches." His voice cracked then, like he was crying, or choking on something worse. He described everything I'd already seen. The door that didn't exist, the flickering lights, the footsteps that followed even in silence, and the figure in the window with no face. But then he said something new, that the apartment chooses people, that it feeds off memory, off guilt, off grief, that the worse you feel, the closer it gets, and that it never takes the strong. I tried to leave, he confessed, packed my bags, broke the lease, walked out the door. But I woke up back here, keys in my hand, front door closed. He laughed then, a dry, empty laugh. Somehow, I think it let me go, but not all of me. He mentioned a mirror, one he smashed in the hallway, and something behind it, a wall that bled, a face that didn't move. He said he saw himself, but older, tired, hollow, watching with pity. His final words were barely audible. "If you're hearing this, it chose you too. But maybe you'll do better. Maybe you'll finish what I couldn't. Then static. Long, loud, endless. I listened to it 3 times. The second time, his voice was slower. The third time, it wasn't his voice anymore. It was mine, whispering things I hadn't said yet. Now, sometimes at night, the cassette plays on its own, and the voice is clearer and more familiar, until I don't know who's confessing anymore, him or me. Chapter 21. When the Walls Weep It started with a stain, small, dark, slow spreading on the bedroom wall. At first I thought it was moisture, but when I touched it, it was warm, and it pulsed. By morning there were more, long trails running down from the ceiling corners, thick and reddish-brown, like old blood, but with a smell I couldn't place. Not rot, something older than that. I tried to clean one with a towel. The fabric hissed where it touched, like acid meeting flesh. My fingers stung for hours afterward, and the stain just came back, thicker. I stopped touching them, started marking their locations on a notebook, but the marks kept changing. New streaks appeared where none were before, and the old ones moved. Sometimes they formed shapes, rough outlines, faces, eyes. Once I swear I saw a handprint smeared in the mess, 5 long fingers dragging downward, like something tried to claw its way out. The walls groaned when I got close, a low sound, like a building settling, but alive, breathing, resisting, leaking. They weren't just damaged, they were suffering. One night, I woke to dripping sounds, loud, heavy, deliberate. I followed the noise into the kitchen. The walls, they were bleeding, slowly, rhythmically, like tears. The fluid pooled on the floor, but it never spread beyond the threshold, almost as if the apartment was keeping it inside, containing it, or feeding it back into itself. I tried calling someone, a plumber, a contractor, anyone. No one answered, not even a dial tone, just silence, and the faint sound of liquid moving inside the walls. I placed buckets beneath the worst leaks. In the morning, they were all empty, dry, but the stains had doubled in size, and my shoes were soaked. Now, the walls cry every night, at exactly 1:17 a.m. The sound isn't sad, it's hungry. And when I press my ear to the plaster, I can hear something whispering between the tears. The fog had always been there, a constant blanket outside my window, thicker than natural. But that night, it was different. It didn't just cover, it clung, and inside it, something moved. At first, I thought it was just wind, a shifting shadow, a passing cloud. But the shape didn't drift. It paced, back and forth across the sidewalk below, as if it were waiting for something. I stood behind the curtain, barely breathing. The figure was tall, unmoving now, its outline blurred by the mist, but not invisible. It had weight, presence. It owned the street, and it was looking up. Even though I couldn't see eyes, I felt them, burning through the glass, through the fog, into me. The kind of stare that knows you completely, that doesn't ask permission, that claims ownership. I tried to step back, but couldn't. My body froze, locked in place, and then the shape raised its hand. Slow, deliberate, pointing. At my window, I dropped to the floor, heart hammering. Crawled to the hallway, lights flickering around me. No sound followed, just silence pressing in from every angle, and the taste of metal in my mouth. An hour passed before I stood up again. The fog still hung thick outside, But the shape was gone. No footprints. No sign. Only a smudge on the glass, shaped like a hand. The next morning, I went outside for the first time in days. The street was empty, but the mist didn't fade, not even in daylight. And when I walked a block away, I felt it. Something following, just behind the fog line. I turned fast, more than once. Never caught it fully. Just a shimmer, a ripple in the air, like heat distortion, but cold and always watching. Back in the apartment, the windows were fogged from the outside, with shapes pressed faintly against the glass. Foreheads, palms, as if they'd been leaning in for hours. I wiped one clear and saw nothing. But when I blinked, there it was again. Closer. Inside the window, this time. Between the glass and the curtain. Now the fog never lifts. It waits at the edges, pressed to the walls. And inside it, something breathes. Something shaped like a man, but heavier than anything human. The landline hadn't worked in years. It came with the apartment, dusty, unplugged, forgotten. I never used it. Didn't even know if the wiring behind the wall was active. But that night, it rang. The sound cut through the silence like a scream. Sharp. Old, mechanical, the kind of ring that belongs to another decade. I stared at it for a long moment. Then, slowly, I picked up the receiver. No dial tone, no static, just breathing. Slow, shallow, human, or close enough. I didn't speak. After several seconds, the voice came. Soft, gentle, female, but wrong. Too smooth, too even, like it had been rehearsed. "Don't look at the hallway," it said. My eyes were already drifting toward it, but I stopped, frozen by the tone. It wasn't a warning. It was a command, and my body obeyed before I understood why. The voice continued. "You're being watched." Pause. "But not from where you think." Then silence. I whispered. "Who is this?" No response. Only more breathing. Then a whisper, barely audible. "Me." I dropped the phone, backed away as it began ringing again. Once, then twice. Then a long, drawn-out third tone that didn't stop. I ripped it from the wall, but it kept ringing. No chord. No power, just sound, rising like steam from the plastic shell, until it stopped suddenly, mid-tone. That night, my cell phone started vibrating every hour on the hour. No calls, no messages, just a black screen lighting up with nothing, until 3:17 a.m., when it finally rang, with the same old landline tone. I didn't answer, but I know I will. Eventually. Because the voice isn't outside anymore. It's beneath my thoughts, waiting for me to listen again. It wasn't the voice from the phone this time. It came from inside the apartment. Soft, close, impossibly near. And it said my name. Not shouted. Spoken, like an old friend returning. I froze mid-step, holding my breath. The voice came again, gentler, now, like it had known me for years. "Don't be afraid," it said. "You've always been here." I turned in circles, searching for a source. Nothing. No shadows moving, no doors open. But I felt the sound. Not in my ears, but in my bones. It vibrated beneath my ribs. The voice began speaking to me every night. Not always at 3:17. Sometimes earlier, sometimes in dreams. It told me things I hadn't thought about in years. Secrets I hadn't even admitted to myself. "You remember the treehouse?" it whispered once. And I did. Suddenly, painfully. a childhood memory long buried. Day I fell, and no one came. But the voice remembered. It called me by names I hadn't used in decades. Nicknames only one person ever knew. Names I never wrote, never said aloud. But it knew. It remembered more than I did. Sometimes it asked questions. Do you miss her? Why did you lie? Would you go back if you could? It never judged. It only watched. One night, it said, "You brought this with you." And I whispered back, "What?" The air grew colder. The door was always yours. Then it went silent for days. I tried to ignore it, but silence felt worse, like something had turned its back, abandoning me in my own head. And when it returned, it didn't ask. It just spoke, and I listened. Now the voice feels closer than my thoughts. Sometimes I wonder if it is my thoughts, not invading, replacing, changing me slowly from the inside out, making space for itself. I've stopped talking to other people. They ask questions I can't answer. They see confusion where I see clarity. But the voice understands. It tells me I'm almost ready. Tonight it said something new. Soon you'll remember what you really are. I didn't respond. Because, deep down, I think I already know. It began with small things. A chair slightly moved. A glass placed where I hadn't left it. Drawers opened an inch, no further. Little shifts in my space. Then it escalated. Lights turned on before I entered. Footsteps echoed behind me, never ahead. The smell of burnt matches lingered after showers, and the apartment felt shared. One morning, I woke to 2 coffee cups in the sink. I live alone. Hadn't had company in weeks. I stared at the second cup for a long time, afraid to throw it away. I started hearing movement while I slept. A second rhythm of breath, just off mine. Soft creaks from the kitchen floor. A cough from the far end of the hallway. And the faint scratch of nails against wood. At first I tried to catch it. Stayed up late, lights off, waiting. But nothing ever showed. Until I blinked, and the living room chair was rocking. As if someone had just stood up, I began whispering, asking who it was. No reply, just silence, heavier than any voice. But the more I spoke, the more the apartment listened. One night, I came home and the door was unlocked. I never forget to lock it. Inside, everything looked normal. Except the mirror, wiped clean. My reflection wasn't mine, not entirely. There was a new coat hanging by the door, long, black, unfamiliar. It smelled like rain and rust. I touched it, and my hands trembled for hours. Now I set a place for 2 at dinner, not out of fear, out of acceptance. The chair across from me stays empty, but the plate is always slightly disturbed by morning, and the fork is warm. Sometimes I see movement in my peripheral vision. A shape, tall and still, watching. But when I turn, nothing's there, just a whisper that lingers. This is your home too. I don't ask it to leave anymore, because I'm not sure I was here first. Maybe I was the guest all along. An interruption. A mistake that finally invited itself in. And now I keep the door unlocked, because I know it's already inside. And maybe, just maybe, it's been waiting for me to leave. It started in the bathroom mirror. A subtle delay, half a second, no more. I moved, and the image hesitated. Not a glitch, a decision. Like it was choosing whether to follow me. I tested it with small movements, turning my head, raising one hand, blinking. Each time, the reflection was just a moment too late. Then it stopped following altogether. One morning, I smiled, and it didn't. It just stared back, expressionless, like it was waiting for something, or someone else. I covered the mirror with a towel, but every time I entered the room, the towel was gone, folded neatly on the counter. The mirror always uncovered, always watching. Soon, it wasn't just the bathroom. Reflections in the microwave, the window, even my phone screen. They lingered, moved on their own. Sometimes they weren't alone. One night, I caught the reflection turning away from me. It faced something behind it, something I couldn't see. I spun around, but the room was empty. When I looked back, the reflection was already staring again, smiling faintly. I stopped making eye contact, avoided shiny surfaces, but they were everywhere, and sometimes I could feel them blink. Even when mine stayed open, I filmed myself in the mirror once, just to be sure I wasn't imagining things. The video showed me standing still, but in the mirror, I moved, tilted my head, looked directly at the camera, and winked. I deleted the video, but it came back the next day. Different file name, same footage, except now, the mirror version wasn't alone. There was someone standing behind it. Tall, blurred, familiar. Me, maybe. Or what's left of me. The reflection leaned in, lips parting. But the video cut to black. Now I dream in mirrors. Rooms where nothing matches. Where I walk, but the reflection doesn't. Where it stands still and watches me sink into glass, like it's waiting to take my place. I've stopped checking mirrors, but sometimes I catch them watching from behind other people. Their reflections move before they do, like mine, like it's spreading. It stopped at 3:17 a.m., not once, every night. No matter how many times I reset it, rewound it, replaced the batteries, it always returned to that same moment, as if the clock knew something I didn't. I switched to digital. Same thing. Numbers, froze in place, screen flickering gently. The air around me stilled, as if holding its breath. Then slowly, everything would resume, except the clock. I started checking the time constantly, but no matter the hour, I felt it approaching. Like 3:17 wasn't a time, it was a presence, and it was circling. On the third night, all the clocks in the apartment broke at once. The stove, my phone, even a wristwatch I hadn't worn in years, all stuck at 3:17. At first I thought it was coincidence. Then I realized what I was doing at that exact minute. Always the same thing. Standing, listening. I began writing notes to myself before bed, trying to track what happened each night. But the notes changed by morning, scribbled over, same message every time. Don't forget. One night, I stayed awake watching the secondhand tick. It froze on 3:16:59 and refused to move. I sat there for hours, but time never crossed the threshold. The world outside changed, shadows shifted, walls creaked, but the clock never moved past it, as if something was waiting, not for time to pass, but for me to break first. I smashed one of the clocks in. Frustration. The moment it shattered, all the others ticked forward 1 second. Just one. Then stopped again, holding me there. Now I no longer know what day it is. The sky looks the same each morning. My body feels suspended in the space between seconds, like I'm stuck inside the moment time gave up. Inside 3:17. Some nights, I hear ticking. But it's not from any device. It comes from the walls, from the floor, from beneath my skin. I think time still moves, but not for me. I think the clocks are working fine. They're just keeping track of something else. Something that only happens when everything stops. At first I thought it was a trick of the light, a shadow stretching too far, a coat hanging wrong. But when I blinked, it didn't move. It stood there, still, tall, silent, in the doorway. I stared for what felt like hours. The hallway, behind it, was darker than usual. No features, no face, just a shape. Human, almost. More like the idea of a person. I called out, voice cracking. No answer, no sound. But the air in the room changed. Heavier, thick with attention. It didn't step forward. It didn't need to. Its presence filled the room like smoke. I could feel it pressing against my skin, as if it was already around me. I turned on every light. They flickered violently, but stayed on. The figure remained, unaffected, like it wasn't part of this world's rules. Eventually, I turned away. Not from bravery, from fear. Fear that if I looked too long, I'd understand. And I knew I wasn't ready to know. Not yet. When I looked back, it was gone. But the hallway felt different, stretched, like the walls had pulled back to make room for something larger than the space allowed. That night, I dreamt of the figure. But this time, I was the one in the doorway, watching someone sleep. I didn't move. But in the dream, I smiled. I woke up standing in the hallway, no memory of walking there, barefoot, cold, staring at the same doorway. But this time, it was empty, and I was shaking. I placed a chair in front of the door, something to block it, even symbolically. The next morning, the chair was gone, moved to the far corner of the room, facing the doorway again. Now, the figure doesn't hide. Sometimes I see it in reflections, other times in the space between blinks. But most often, it's in the doorway, waiting to be let in. And worst of all, sometimes it looks just like me. Same posture, same clothes. But with eyes I've never owned, and a patience that doesn't belong to the living. They started as hairline fractures, small, quiet scars across the walls, easy to ignore, easy to explain. Old building, dry air, settling structure. But I was wrong. The cracks spread faster than they should. One reached across the ceiling overnight, another split down the hallway, thin but deep. They weren't random. They were forming patterns. I ran my hand over one of them. It felt warm. Not like sun-warmed paint, like skin. And beneath my fingers it vibrated. A pulse. A whisper I couldn't hear yet. Then I began to dream of them. Cracks running through the ground like veins. And if I leaned close enough, they would speak. Not with words, with memory. Mine, and someone else's. I woke with dried blood beneath my nails, and a new crack beside the bed. This one curved, sharp, like handwriting. I could almost read it, almost. I photographed them every day, studied their growth like symptoms. Each image seemed to shift overnight. They curved inward, always toward me. One morning, I heard it clearly. A faint voice from the crack above my desk. Not loud, urgent, like it was trying to warn me, but choked by plaster and dust. I pressed my ear to the wall. My name came through, slow, strained, drawn out like breath before a scream. Then silence. I carved into the crack with a knife. I don't know why. Compulsion, curiosity. The wall bled dust, and a word appeared. Below. That night, the walls creaked in rhythm. Not random, not weather, like something shifting within them, rearranging, preparing to open. Now, every time, I walk past a crack, it speaks. Not with sound, with thought. It pulls something from my head, twists it, returns it broken. The walls are remembering me. Wrong. It happened first while I was drifting to sleep. A gentle tug on the blanket. Too soft to be alarming, too real to be imagined. I opened my eyes. Nothing there. The room was still, but I could feel it. The weight of something watching, waiting, just beyond the edge of vision. And then another tug, stronger this time. I froze. The blanket shifted again, slowly pulled toward the floor, as if fingers, unseen, were gathering it. I yanked it back, heart racing, but the pressure never left. The next night it touched me, a single finger along my arm, cold, dry, intentional. I sat up, breath caught in my throat. There was no one in the room. I didn't sleep after that. Lights on, blanket tight, but the hands returned, not visible, never seen, only felt, brushing, tapping, pressing. Sometimes they hold my ankles, gently at first, then firmer. I kick, scream, but they never bruise, never break. Just remind me they're there. One night, they covered my eyes, not forcefully, protectively, as if they didn't want me to see something. Something entering the room behind them. Something heavier than shadow. The darkness felt different that night. Thicker. Denser. Like it had a body. And the hands were part of it. Or maybe extensions of something deeper. Now, I sleep sitting up. Back against the wall, feet off the floor. But even then, I feel them. Resting on my shoulders. Fingers curling into my collarbone. I tried to speak to them once. Whispered, "What do you want?" The room shivered, and a hand touched my chest, right over my heart. I dream of them now. Dozens of hands. Reaching from the ceiling, the floor, the mirror. Not grabbing, guiding. Leading me somewhere I don't want to go. Somewhere they already belong. Last night, they didn't touch me, but left fingerprints on the wall. Smudges of ash, shaped like grasping palms. 12 prints side by side. And beneath them, the word, soon. It began with the sound of something shifting below the floor. A dragging, like wood over concrete. Soft, steady, deliberate. It didn't echo. It breathed. A presence underneath. I pulled up the rug in the hallway, and there it was. A small, metal ring set into the floorboards. I had never noticed it before, but it felt ancient. I pried at it with trembling hands. The wood groaned like something being disturbed. Eventually, the hatch gave way. A black hole gaped beneath. No stairs, just a rusted ladder descending into nothing. The air that rose from it was damp and warm. It smelled like earth, iron, and something older than both. I stared into the void for hours, drawn, terrified. And then I climbed down. The descent took longer than it should have. 10, 20, 30 rungs. Still no floor. Only silence. And a steady, growing hum. Like something singing through stone. When I finally reached the bottom, the space was tight. Barely enough room to stand. Stone walls pressed in from every side. But there were corridors. Twisting, branching. Impossible. I walked. Each step echoed like a heartbeat. The stone was damp underfoot, and on the walls, carvings. symbols I almost recognized. As I turned a corner, the light above me faded. Not all at once, like a breath leaving a body. I was alone now, truly alone. Except I wasn't. Footsteps followed me, soft and bare. Never too close, always just behind. Like they didn't want to catch me, just keep me moving. At the end of one hallway, I found a door. Tall, metal, covered in the same symbols as the walls. It pulsed softly, like a living thing. And it was warm. I didn't open it. Not yet. I stood there, listening. And from behind the door, I heard myself whispering. The stone wasn't silent. It breathed. I could feel it in the walls, in the floor beneath me. Each vibration carried weight, like thought without words, and I was being listened to. At first, I walked slowly, tracing carvings with my fingers. They pulsed faintly under my touch. Not cold, not warm, just alive, reacting to memory. I began to hear voices, not loud but layered, like dozens of people whispering underwater. Some used my name. Others recited phrases I hadn't heard in years, childhood sentences, forgotten fears. They weren't random. They knew what to say, things I'd tried to bury, moments I wished had never happened. But the stone remembered. At a junction, I found markings on the floor, not carved, smeared. Handprints in ash, some small, some large, all leading in the same direction. I followed them, not because I wanted to, because I felt I had already done it, like retracing my own footsteps. But from another life. The whispers grew clearer. They no longer overlapped. They synchronized, repeating my own thoughts back to me. Not from today, from tomorrow. One voice stood out. It didn't whisper. It hummed, the same melody the hallway lights used to flicker in. Soft, circular, terrifyingly familiar. I called out just once. Who are you? The walls answered in vibration. Not words, not noise, just one deep pulse through the stone. And then a second, a third. Like a heartbeat, I found a stone basin at the center of a chamber. Shallow, smooth, full of dark liquid. No reflection in it, just movement. It rippled before I touched it. And I heard my voice say, "Come home." I stepped back, but the basin began to boil. Not with heat, but with sound. The whispers screamed silently, crashing into my chest. They weren't asking. They were remembering me. Too well. Now, even back in the apartment, I hear stone. Not creaking wood or groaning pipes. Stone, under the floor, behind the walls, whispering and waiting for me to listen again. I turned a corner and stopped breathing. There, beneath the stone and shadow, was my apartment. Same walls, same layout, same cracked mirror above the sink. But everything was wrong. The colors were faded, the furniture warped, as if sculpted, from memory. Photos hung where mine should be, but the faces were blurred, except for mine. My face was in every frame. The air inside was thick and dry. Each step echoed like I was walking through myself. I touched the couch. It crumbled under my fingers. Dust rose in slow motion, and beneath the fabric, a tooth. The refrigerator buzzed quietly. I opened it, expecting rot. Instead, it was filled with items I hadn't bought in years. Childhood, cereal, expired juice, a single apple, perfectly preserved. The bedroom door was slightly open. I pushed it with my fingertips. Inside, the bed was neatly made. On the pillow, my old journal, the one I burned years ago. I opened it. Every page was filled with the same line, "I never left," written in my handwriting. But I had never written it. The bathroom was colder. The mirror reflected a different room, a version I didn't recognize. In it, I was older, tired, smiling with resignation. There was movement in the reflection. Not me, not now. Someone else, pacing the hallway, wearing my clothes, dragging something heavy behind them. I turned away, heart pounding. And that's when I heard footsteps above me. Soft, familiar, as if someone was walking through the real apartment, following my exact path. I stood still, waiting, listening to myself move above, opening drawers, sitting on the couch, breathing the same rhythm. But I was down here. In the corner of the room, I saw a second ladder, rusty, old, covered in ash, leading down, deeper. The apartment had another version, and it was calling me. Now, when I sit in my living room, the floor feels hollow. Sometimes, I knock gently, and something knocks back, in the same pattern, like I'm the shadow in someone else's home. It started with the voicemail. A friend called me, confused. "You left me a message last night," he said. But I hadn't touched my phone, not once. He played it back for me, and there I was. My voice, calm, slow, unfamiliar, saying things I didn't understand. "Don't let it in. It's already inside." I checked my call log. No outgoing calls. But the message was real. Time-stamped at 3:17 a.m., like everything else. Then the emails started. Drafts I'd never written. Sentences typed in my tone. But wrong. Too clean. Too composed. They ended with, "See you soon." I tried to record myself sleeping, just to be sure. And in the audio, my voice whispered things to the silence. Things I wouldn't dare say awake. I spoke to someone in the recording, called them by name, a name I didn't recognize, repeated it 3 times, then said, "I remember now." The worst part? I smiled. I could hear it in my breath, my pacing. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. Now devices around me activate on their own. Voice assistants respond to commands I never gave, and sometimes they answer questions I never asked, with my voice. But not my intent. I unplugged everything. Even wrapped my phone in foil. Didn't matter. Last night the TV turned on, and I was on the screen, laughing. The image didn't match. I was saying things I've never said, to people I've never met. But they looked afraid, and I looked comfortable. I no longer trust what leaves my mouth. Sometimes I speak before I mean to. Other times, I stay silent. But someone answers, anyway, in my voice, from behind me. Now, when I hear myself, I pause, because I don't know if it's really me, or something using my voice like a mask, and the more it speaks, quieter I feel inside. It began with the sound, a low, rhythmic hum, almost like wind, but deeper, steady, like breath through a throat too wide to be human. The guest room had always been cold, unused, avoided, but lately it felt different. The air moved on its own, and the walls, they pulsed. I placed my palm against the door. It was warm. Each few seconds, it rose and fell slightly beneath my hand. Like the entire room was inhaling, like it was alive. I opened the door slowly. The sound stopped instantly. The air felt heavy, dense, charged with something invisible. But the silence was worse than the breathing, because silence meant it was listening. Inside, the walls were damp. Not wet, damp with heat. The ceiling arched lower than I remembered, and the corners seemed to move, just slightly when I looked away. I stepped inside, and the floor gave a little, as if I'd stepped on flesh, not wood. A soft bounce beneath my foot, then a faint exhale. Behind me, the door closed on its own. I stood still for what felt like an hour, trying not to breathe too loud, trying not to match its rhythm, because if I did, I was afraid it would sink with me. There was no furniture left. Everything had sunk into the walls. Outlines where a dresser once stood. An impression of a chair melted into the floor. Absorbed by the room, I whispered, "Hello." The walls responded with a low groan. Not echo, reply. Like the room knew me now, and it was tired of pretending it didn't. I left quickly, but not fast enough. The moment I stepped out, I heard it inhale. A long, satisfied breath, as if it had tasted something, and liked it. Now every night, I hear it breathing again, louder, deeper. And when I pass the door, it swells slightly, like lungs, like it's waiting for me to come back, so it can breathe with me. I stopped covering the mirrors. It didn't matter. They uncovered themselves, always folded neatly, always clean, like they were being polished from the inside. One night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, still, silent, staring at myself until my eyes burned, and just as I turned away, it spoke. "Don't leave," the voice said, not from behind me, from inside the glass. My reflection didn't move, but its mouth curled into a smile. I asked, "Who are you?" The mirror stayed still, but the voice whispered, "The one you left behind." It sounded like me, but there was something hollow in it. I leaned closer. The glass fogged slightly from inside. A breath I didn't take. A presence just beneath the surface, waiting for my face to come near. Then it began talking more. Each night, at 3:17. Always a different tone, but the same cadence. It told stories I didn't recognize, about places I'd never been, or hadn't yet. One night, it said, "Do you remember the red room?" I didn't, until I did. A dream I'd buried. A room with no doors, just mirrors on every wall. I screamed at it once, shouted "stop" until my throat cracked. The mirror cracked too, just slightly. A single hairline fracture across my mouth. After that, the voice grew colder, distant, almost cruel. It mocked me, told me things no one else knew. Things I wish I could forget. "I know what you buried," it said. "I know who you left. I know what you did when the lights went out. And worst of all, I know you're not alone in there. Now, the mirror talks without needing my presence. I hear it from other rooms, murmuring, laughing, remembering. Sometimes crying with my voice. Sometimes humming a song I never learned. Covered it again. Bolted a cabinet door over it. But at night, I still see light leaking from the cracks, like someone's turned on a lamp inside the mirror, waiting for me to come home. It began with the crack, a thin line across the ceiling above my bed. At first, just cosmetic. But it widened each night, and something inside it watched me. I felt it before I saw it. A presence pressing downward. A weight not of gravity, but of gaze. Heavy. Focused. Unblinking. I started sleeping on the floor. Even there, I couldn't escape it. I'd wake to the feeling of being studied. Like a specimen. Like prey. And once, like a memory. Then came the blinking. Not mine, the ceiling's. Tiny shifts in light and shadow. A rhythm of presence. Closing. Opening. Waiting. I stood on a chair and looked closer. There, barely visible. Indents in the plaster. Not holes. Impressions. Like skin stretched. Too tight over sockets. Eyes that never needed to open. One night, I stared back. Whispered, "I see you." And the ceiling. Pulsed. Not violently, but like it had been waiting to be noticed. I covered it with boards, nailed them tight. But by morning, they were gone. Stacked neatly on the floor. The ceiling, clean again. I began sleeping with a blanket over my head. But even then, I felt them. Searing through fabric, burning into my skull, marking me. Then the dreams began. Lying on my back, eyes taped open, 1,000 eyes above me, watching, recording, learning. They whispered questions I never wanted asked. What do you fear? What do you remember? What will you give, to be unseen again? I never answered. Last night I heard a new sound, a slow drip, soft, steady, from the center of the ceiling. I looked up, and something blinked. Now I never look up, not even in the day, because I know, if I do, they'll see I'm still here, and they've been waiting for me to look back. It appeared after the storm. A panel in the floor, just outside the kitchen. No seams, no hinges, just there, like it had always been waiting beneath the wood. Undisturbed, buried, now revealed. I stood over it for hours, afraid to touch it, afraid not to. The air above it was warmer, and it pulsed like a heartbeat. I finally opened it at 3:17 a.m. Beneath was a staircase, stone, spiraling, endless, not dust-covered, not decayed, clean, used. I descended slowly. The steps were soft underfoot, like walking on something living. Each footfall felt heard, like the stairs were listening. The air grew thicker the deeper I went. Not stale, active, filled with breath that wasn't mine. Walls narrowed. Time slowed. At the bottom I found a door. Red, smooth, silent. No handle, no lock, just waiting. And carved into it, a single word, stay. I knocked once. The sound didn't echo. It sank, swallowed whole. Then, the door opened by itself, into darkness too complete to exist. Inside was a second version of the staircase, but upside down. Each step led upward, but gravity pulled downward, and standing at the top, or bottom, was me. Not a reflection, not a dream, an exact mirror. But it didn't move like I did. It waited. I asked, "What is this?" It smiled. "You've been coming here since the beginning." Its voice was mine, but steadier, older, tired. "I'm what you become if you keep going," it said. "Or what you left behind when you turned back." I asked what was at the top. It answered, "The truth you asked for," and pointed toward the inverted stair. I haven't gone further yet, but I hear footsteps above me now, descending, slowly. And when I sleep, I dream of walking, Those stairs, in both directions at once. It started with the whispering walls again. But now, the tone had changed. Before, they spoke in fragments. Now, they spoke with direction, like they knew I was finally paying attention. They waited until I was still. No distractions, no movement. Then they began. Softly at first, coaxing. Not haunting, persuading. They said my name gently, not to scare me, but to welcome me. As if I'd finally arrived where I belonged. As if this was always meant to happen. And I was late. "You hear us now," one said. Another followed, from beneath the floor. "You were born with the door inside you." The third, from inside the wall. "We've waited long enough." I asked, "Why me?" The silence held for a long time. Then the answer came. Dozens of voices overlapping. "Because you were listening when no one else would. Because you remembered what others forgot." The whispers became more frequent. They followed me into sleep, spoke as I dreamed. And when I awoke, their words were still in my ears. Familiar now. Comfortable. They started answering my thoughts. Before I spoke. Sometimes before I thought. "You're afraid," they'd say, "but only because you've seen too much." I tested them, whispered lies. They never repeated them. Only the truths I tried to hide, especially the ones I didn't know I still carried. Sometimes they argued, not with me, with each other, about me. I'd hear one say, "He's not ready." Another whisper, "He was made for this." One night I asked, "What happens if I stop listening?" The answer was silence. For hours, until a single voice replied, "You won't." Now they speak constantly, but never too loud. Just enough for me to strain my ears, to lean in, to surrender more of myself. I'm not sure where my thoughts end anymore, or where theirs begin. But I know this. They've been speaking for years. I just finally learned how to hear. It was the back door, the one I never used. It led to an alley that no one walked. Too narrow, too forgotten. But lately, it began to matter. I'd find it locked every morning, bolted from the inside, tightly, deliberately. But I never remembered doing it. And I lived alone. The lock grew stiffer each day, harder to turn, like something on the other side was pulling back, resisting, trying to keep me in, or something out. One night, I left it open, just slightly, to see what would happen. At 3:17 a.m., I woke to the sound of hinges creaking and soft footsteps entering the kitchen. I waited in the hallway, heart pounding. I didn't move, didn't breathe, but I knew. I wasn't alone anymore. Not in the house, not in my skin. When I checked, the door was closed again, locked, but the key was inside my pocket, untouched. And on the floor, dirt. Fresh, wet, like from deep underground. After that, I nailed it shut. Wooden planks, screws, even sealed the frame with tape. The next morning, it was wide open, the nails stacked neatly beside it. I tried to ignore it, avoided that side of the apartment. But the door followed me. Not physically, emotionally. It started appearing in dreams. Always ajar, always pulsing with heat. Something behind it breathing, calling my name softly. Now I hear knocking, but never when I'm near. Only when I've forgotten. It taps once, waits, taps again. And the lock? It turns by itself, clicks in rhythm, like a pulse, like anticipation. Tonight, I left it open again, not as a test, as an invitation, because whatever's behind that door already lives here. It started as a glimpse, just a silhouette. Same build, same walk. Crossing the hallway when I knew I was alone. But when I followed, the room was empty, except for the feeling of being watched. Then I saw him again, sitting in my chair, reading my old notebook. But when I blinked, gone. Only the pages still warm. He began appearing more often. Not ghosts, reflections, but not in mirrors, in windows, TV screens, even puddles on the floor. He moved like me, but smoother, more confident, less tired. He looked at things I avoided. He smiled at things that scared me. One night I watched him from across the room. He didn't know I was there. Or maybe he did, because he turned slowly and winked, called out, "Who are you?" He answered without words, just mouthed, "You." But not in the way that meant same, more like successor. I found photos the next day, on my phone, on my wall, of him in my apartment, doing things I never did, cooking, sleeping, laughing, standing in doorways I avoid, holding the key I thought I lost. He started speaking now, from other rooms, my voice slightly wrong, softer, lower. He says things I think before I think them. I tried to confront him once, stared at the dark glass of the microwave. He appeared beside me and whispered, "I'm what you became when you stopped pretending." Then vanished again. Now, when I sleep, I dream I'm watching myself live, but I'm not in control. And I think he's better at it than I ever was. That's what scares me most, because lately I've started forgetting simple things, my name, my age, my voice, and he remembers all of it, too well, like he's preparing to stay. There's a door at the end of the hall, always closed, always untouched. I never opened it, never questioned why. It simply existed, like a forgotten boundary. Last week it spoke. A voice, low and steady, called my name. Not urgent, not pleading. Just familiar. Like someone who's known me longer than I've known myself. I stood in front of it for hours. My hand hovered near the knob. The door never moved. But the voice whispered, "You're almost ready," then went silent again. Each night since, it returns. Same time, 3:17 a.m. Same tone, same rhythm, like a lullaby buried in dust. It doesn't ask anymore. It waits. The voice knows things I've never said aloud. "Remember the lake?" It murmured. I did. A memory I had buried so deeply it ached to recall. And yet it spoke of it in perfect detail. Sometimes it sounds like me. Other times, like my mother, or my childhood friend, or people I never met but still somehow remember. It changes depending on what I fear. One night I asked, "What are you?" The voice paused, then said, "I'm what you left locked away. I'm what you swore you'd never open. And now I'm lonely." I placed a chair in front of the door, not as a barrier, as a seat. And I sat there every night, listening, letting it tell stories about a life I almost lived. Last night, it asked me to open it, softly. No threat, no force, just longing. "Let me in," it whispered, "or let yourself out." I tried turning the knob. It was cold, colder than any metal should be. It wouldn't budge, but the voice said, It only opens when you stop pretending it's locked. Then laughed, not cruelly, but knowingly. Now I dream of that door, opening slowly, revealing, not a room, but a sky full of voices, calling me by names I forgot I had, welcoming me back like I was never meant to leave. And each night, the voice gets louder, but only when I'm silent, as if it needs space to grow. And one day soon, think it will speak with my mouth. It began with a whisper. Not mine. Not quite. A sound that arrived before I could make it. An echo that preceded the voice. A response before the question. I tested it in the kitchen. Said my name aloud. And from the hallway it came back. Softer. Slower. Spoken before my lips moved. Like it already knew I'd say it. I clapped once. The echo followed. Then another. But this time, it clapped first. Faint, like someone mimicking me in reverse. Mocking time itself. I asked, "Are you listening?" And heard myself answer, "Always." But I hadn't said it yet. The words were waiting to be fulfilled. Now every sound I make feels borrowed, as though I'm rehearsing a scene already performed. I cough, and hear it echo from behind me. Before my chest tightens, before my lungs even move. I tried writing instead. But the words appeared on the paper before I touched the pen. Half sentences. Thoughts I hadn't finished thinking. Correct spellings of feelings I didn't want to name. The echo had learned to write. One night, I whispered something I'd never said aloud, and the answer came from under the floorboards. No need to ask. We already know. It was comforting and terrifying. The walls began to hum with familiarity. Not voices. Now to me. Dozens of versions of my tone. Laughing, sighing, breathing out secrets I hadn't shared. A choir of echoes living ahead of me. I stopped speaking. For a day. Then 2. But the voices continued. Finishing the words I refused to say. I screamed just to interrupt it. But the echo screamed first. A second before I did. And it never stopped. Even after I closed my mouth. Now, it doesn't wait. It lives in the silence between my thoughts, filling the gaps, whispering decisions before I make them, leading me somewhere I never planned to go. I think the echo was never mine. It just used my voice until I stopped using it, and now it walks ahead of me, speaking my future, one sentence at a time. I found it yesterday. Or maybe it found me. A door where none should be, beside the closet. Not new, not hidden, just unnoticed. When I opened it, the air changed. Warm, familiar. A scent I couldn't place exactly. Dust, wood, childhood. And the feeling of déjà vu so strong, I nearly wept. I'd been here before. The walls were faded green, peeling in places I remembered touching. There was a dresser with stickers I used to collect, a bed too small for me now, and a window that looked out into nothing. I stepped inside, and the floor creaked. Once. That same creak from dreams I thought were made up. I turned slowly, breathing shallow. And on the nightstand, a drawing I did as a child. Stick figures. One was me. The other had no face, only a shadow. Labeled in shaky handwriting. My friend. Memories flooded me. Not visions. Sensations. A game I played alone. Except I wasn't alone. A voice that answered before I could ask. And the silence that followed when I told someone. I left that room once. Long ago. Locked it in my mind. Promised never to go back. And yet, Here it was, waiting. The bed was still made, the pillow dented. Like someone had just gotten up, or was about to lie back down. Like the room knew I'd return. I whispered, "Why now?" And the walls sighed. The door didn't close. It breathed, like it was relieved to be remembered. I stayed for hours, sat on the edge of the bed, unsure of my age, unsure of my name, just existing in a memory that felt more solid than the present, more real than the rest of the apartment. When I finally left, the hallway was colder, longer, but I knew the door would be there again. Not always, just when it needed me. Because some rooms never forget you. And now, I wonder what else I've forgotten. What other spaces I built to hide. And if they too are still waiting. Dusty, quiet, and patient. For me to finally come back. It happened slowly. A drawer on the wrong side. A chair facing a direction I never used. A mug I didn't own, resting on the table. At first, I blamed exhaustion. Then the kitchen changed. Subtle at first. The fridge was older, the wallpaper, gone. I opened a cabinet and found plates I'd never bought. Names carved into them, not mine. The hallway grew longer, by inches, by breath. I counted the steps each night, one more than the last, and the light at the end flickered unfamiliar. My bedroom walls shifted. A crack I always stared at disappeared, replaced by a photo frame, a photo I was in, smiling beside someone I didn't recognize. Books on my shelf now bore different titles, some in languages I don't speak. One whispered when opened. Another bled ink onto the floor. None of them were mine. I tried calling a friend. The number connected, but to a stranger. She said my name before I spoke, told me to be careful, said I wasn't where I thought I was. I checked my ID, still my face. But the name was wrong, just one letter off, a version I'd never used, but somehow remembered. The mirrors show a different reflection now. Same face, different background. A couch I've never owned, a window I've never looked through. I left once, just to see. Walk down the hall, out the building. The street was familiar, until it wasn't. Stores, with reversed names. People who didn't blink. When I came back, my key didn't fit. The door opened anyway, and inside, everything looked perfect, just how I'd left it. But I felt like a guest. Now, every object in the apartment watches me. Not with eyes, with recognition. Like they know who should be here. And it isn't me. Not anymore. I still sleep in the bed, still sit on the couch, but I check the rooms twice a day. Because one day soon, I know, this apartment will finish replacing itself. I noticed it after midnight. A draft coming from a wall that had never breathed before. Behind the bookshelf, something hollow. Not cold, deep. A space waiting to be found. I moved the shelf slowly. No dust behind it. Just smooth wall, and a door. Plain, brown, unlabeled, but humming, faintly. I checked the layout of the apartment. Twice. There was no space for another room. The wall backed against my neighbor's unit. Or, it used to. The door opened without resistance. And inside, silence. But not emptiness. It was a large room. Too large. The ceiling stretched impossibly high. The walls curved outward like lungs. It smelled of soil and copper. And though the lights were off, I could see everything. There was a chair in the center, old, Wooden. Familiar. I didn't remember it, but my body did. It felt like confession. On the far wall, carvings glowed. Symbols I'd seen in dreams. Spirals, eyes, teeth. They pulsed as I breathed. Or maybe I pulsed with them. I paced the room for hours. Measured its width, its height. Wrote it all down. But when I left and returned, the measurements changed. The chair moved slightly each time, always facing me, always waiting. And the room grew warmer, like something inside it was waking. Knocked on the wall that bordered the hallway. No echo, no response, just softness, as if the room was growing outward. Eventually, I tried closing the door, but it never fully shut. There's always a sliver of light escaping, always a hum in the walls, and the scent of waiting. Now I hear footsteps from inside, even when I'm not near it. Heavy, patient, walking a space that doesn't belong, in a room that shouldn't fit, but does. It started on my microwave. Instead of the clock, it displayed 72. I hadn't said anything. Pressed all the buttons. Nothing changed. An hour later, it read 71. Not minutes. Not time I could control. It was counting down. To what? I didn't know. Then I noticed the same number on my phone, in a folder I didn't create. The file was titled Listen. It wouldn't open. But the number inside matched the microwave. I began searching the apartment. Behind a painting, scratched into the wall, 6913. On the mirror, fogged in condensation, 6840. Always decreasing. Always synchronized. No alarms, no warnings, just time passing. And numbers falling. As if the building itself was watching a clock I couldn't see. And didn't need to. I stopped sleeping. Watched the digits shift, second by second. They never skipped, never froze. Relentless. When it hit 60, things changed. The walls felt tighter, the floors colder, and every whisper in the house grew louder. More coordinated, people stopped, answering my calls. Or they answered, but said nothing, just breathing. Rhythmic. Matched perfectly to the ticking I now heard at night. A pulse that wasn't mine. I covered every screen, removed every battery. But the numbers returned, carved into fruit, printed in dust, burned into bread. 5259, 5258, 5257. Always ticking, always near. At 48, ow, I heard a knock, 3 times, every hour on the hour. The door remained closed, but the air changed after each one. Now it's at 4106 and dropping. I don't know what happens at 0. But I've started whispering to the numbers, and I think they're whispering back. It began as a hum. Low, distant, like an old television left on, barely noticeable during the day, but deafening at night. It lived inside the walls. At first, I thought it was electrical. Wires buzzing, signals crossing. I turned off the power, pulled every fuse. But the sound remained. It wasn't coming from anything. It was beneath everything. A bed of static, a floor of voices, buzzing just beyond language. I pressed my ear to the living room wall. There it was, soft, crackling, like a broken radio, but buried deeper and layered with breath. One night, I brought a radio to the wall, turned the dial slowly. At one frequency, the static vanished, replaced by whispering, familiar tones. My own voice. I froze. The radio repeated a phrase. He's almost ready. Over and over, each time more distorted. I smashed the radio. Silence followed, but the wall kept humming, as if amused, as if patient. The static grew stronger. Now it came through the pipes, through the outlets, even the floors, like the entire building was a speaker. Sometimes it forms words, barely, half sentences. Behind you. Open the wall. I started scratching at the drywall. Found nothing at first. Then insulation soaked in black fluid. Soft, warm, pulsing, buzzing with sound. Now I hear it in my head. Not imagined, not internal. Broadcasted. Looping phrases I never said. Telling me where to go, and I think, the static isn't noise. It's signal. It's calling me deeper. And I've already started answering. It came in an envelope. No address. No postage. Just left on the kitchen table at 3:17 a.m., sealed with wax. Marked with a symbol I've seen only in dreams. Inside was a single card. Blank on one side. On the other, 4 words in trembling ink. It's time. Come home. Nothing else. I checked the doors. All were locked. Windows sealed. But the hallway light flickered in response, and the door at the end creaked open on its own. I approached slowly. Felt the floor shift beneath me. Not unstable. Responsive. Every step confirmed. Every breath acknowledged. Inside, the apartment was identical. Same layout. Same furniture. But cleaner. Brighter. Wrong. A figure stood by the window. Tall. Still. Familiar. My face but calm. He didn't speak. He only nodded once, slowly. Behind him, the walls pulsed softly. Alive with movement I couldn't see. The air shimmered with something unseen, like the threshold between dream and memory, like stepping into what should have been. The figure held out his hand, not demanding, not pleading, just offering. And I hesitated. I asked, "Is this it?" He smiled faintly. "You've already been here. This is the moment you chose before you knew." I wanted to deny it, but couldn't. The apartment behind me began to crack, walls splitting, voices overlapping, mirrors screaming, time bleeding backward. He stepped forward, placed the card in my hand again, and whispered, "Step through, or stay broken." Then waited. Now, I'm standing between 2 doorways, one collapsing, one opening, and I know. The invitation was never a choice. It was a return. I stepped through, not into light, not into darkness, but into something before either. A space without walls, but filled with memory. It wasn't silent. It hummed with every sound I'd ever heard. Laughter, crying, whispered regrets, and my name over and over, spoken by mouths I never saw. The ground wasn't ground. It was thought. It shifted with every step I considered taking. Each decision rippled outward, until choice itself became weightless. I saw versions of myself, not reflections, echoes. One wept in a corner, another stared at me blankly, and one simply watched, smiling. He stepped forward, the version that never broke, the one who listened from the beginning. He said nothing, but I understood. This place wasn't punishment. It wasn't salvation. It was acknowledgement, the conclusion of listening too long, of remembering what should stay buried. I passed through rooms shaped by my fear, rooms I'd lived in, rooms I'd forgotten, each one dissolving as I recognized it, like the memory had finally finished playing. The house, my house, folded in on itself, ceilings collapsing into walls, doors melting into windows. every corner flattening into a single point. A singular origin, and at that center, a chair. Old, wooden, familiar. I sat, not because I was tired, but because I knew it had always been waiting for me. Time stopped. Not froze, ended, because time had been the hallway I walked all along. And I had finally reached its door, unlocked it, stepped in. I heard one last sound, a breath. Not mine, not from behind, from within. Then, stillness. Not silence, not absence, just completion. Like the moment after a story ends, and before anyone dares to speak again.